Welcome everybody. My name's Tanya Peters from Safe Communities Foundation New Zealand, and along with Megan Brotherton from the Australian Safe Community Foundation, we are your hosts for this webinar. Before we start, just a few housekeeping matters. We have 4 fantastic presenters today who have each prepared presentations for you. We'll have time for questions after each presentation, and we want this to be interactive, so please ask questions. Each participant has access to the GoToWebinar control panel on your screen. Please familiarise yourself with the features. If you're still having any problems, please send us a message via the control panel and we will endeavour to resolve the issue. If you would like to ask a question during the presentations, please type your question in the question area of the control panel on your screen. Or you may wish to put your hand up. To put your hand up, please click the yellow hand in the control panel. At the end of each presentation, the presenters will try and answer your questions. The webinar will be recorded and available for viewing early next week. I would now like to introduce our first presenter, Jeff Wilson, who will give you an overview of New Zealand workplace safety. This will then be followed by 2 New Zealand Safe Communities brief example of workplace safety initiatives. I'm now going to hand over to Jeff so he can present. So over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Tanya. Just get this. Can everybody see my slide now?
Yep, you just need to make it full screen, Jeff.
Okay, I've just got to minimise this again. I've got the.
So if you click on slideshow and then full screen.
Yep. Hang on. Coming up.
From beginning.
Yep. Okay. Now I've got to just. Okay. Everyone can hear me, I guess. Welcome. This is the first time I've participated in a webinar, so hopefully you can bear with me. I just thought I'd give a quick overview of what the scene here is in New Zealand. I'm probably wearing 2 hats. I'm also involved with the Safe Communities Foundation New Zealand, but my day job is working for SiteSafe, which is a incorporated society, not-for-profit group. And we specialise in assisting the construction industry in New Zealand reduce their injury rates, and we provide a number of services to our members, training, auditing and so forth, safety information, and of course we advocate. So just the scene in New Zealand is this really. Some of our Australian participants today will be aware perhaps of what experience you've had with your legislation, but we've had a few drivers for change in this country, and I suppose the hitting point was in October 2010 when the Pike River coal mine exploded, and methane type explosions in coal mines have happened. They caused the largest deaths in New Zealand way back in the last century, and they're still occurring. But this was a tragedy, and a number of things all came together that went wrong at the same time, including the role of the regulator. Our workplace fatality rates were still above Australia's, particularly Australia, because that's where we measure ourselves. And it was 20 years since the previous legislation was introduced, which was very much based on performance-based legislation, and New Zealand was going through a restructuring of its economy at the time, so it was very much in government circles. It was do away with regulation and have minimal standards based on performance, and letting businesses get on and manage their risk. But in the case of Pike River, that was seen as a significant failure. So there were commissions of inquiries, independent task forces set up, and they produced eventually a document called Working Safer, issued by our government, called the Blueprint. It's available on the websites I've got on the end slide. But basically it's proposed an overhaul of our legislation and decided to base it on Australian model law, which is adopted in some states, and 1 or 2 it's not, but the others that haven't adopted it are doing, as far as we can see, similar things. Our government has an injury reduction target, 25% reduction by 2020. That includes both fatalities and serious injuries, and a raft of other changes to support the legislation. Just to give you some idea, recently ACC, which is our workplace insurer here, undertook a taxonomy of taking a number of claims from house building which tends to be made up of smaller businesses, and they tend to have a higher injury rate. But looking at the types of energies that cause the injuries and the mechanisms, using those terms, but as maybe the next presenter, Andy, I think from ACC, will confirm, it's putting aside fatalities, strains, sprains, and then falls account for, as you can see, about 90% of the types of injuries. And they're the same old things of lifting, lowering, pushing, pulling, carrying it. And when you talk of falls, you're talking falls at the same level, from a height, coming down off a ladder or so forth. And I think ACC here has the same issue in falls of people in the home environment. And of course with machinery there are some there, but you can see that percentage is small, but they do tend to be quite significant injuries. So the reform package here in New Zealand is they're overhauling the law, and there's a H&S Health Safety Reform Bill being in place, exactly copying the Australian model with some minor modifications. A parliamentary select committee is hearing submissions on it now. It probably won't be passed before our general election, but the current government and the opposition parties have all pledged that they'll pass this legislation. A new agency has been created, WorkSafe New Zealand, standalone state agency with its own board of directors. There'll be a clarity of duties from directors of companies through to what we call a PCBU. Now for Australians they'll know that backwards, but that means persons conducting a business or an undertaking. So it's wider than just an employer. It includes people that come into your workplace to install light bulbs. It includes people that provide services to workplaces. So it's anybody that's creating work and then creating risks and hazards around it. There'll be new and updated regulations and more codes of practice to support the legislation. Now the importance of that is that we've had very much a piece of enabling legislation without much detail around it. So this time the government's very committed to say there'll be a lot of detail to set out what is the best practice to use to avoid the injuries. And of course there'll be a focus on high risk areas. That includes in this country forestry, farming, construction, parts of manufacturing and fishing. So they are the 5 sort of industries that cause the majority of major fatalities and serious injuries. There'll be better coordination between government agencies, they all say that, to get better cohesion. And the other one is improved worker participation. Now, we recently undertook a study tour to Victoria, and the thing that comes to mind is Australia, well I know in Victoria and I think New South Wales, the role of unions is much more prominent there than what it is in this country. And I think that's something we just need to think about if we want to lift awareness of safety issues, about how that can be done. If the unions have a role here, but they simply do not have the extent of membership like they do in Australia. And it's a question of how do you get to individuals via their workplaces or via their communities. And there'll be stronger penalties to reinforce the new requirements. The Health and Safety and Reform Bill that you're looking at, the PCBU, as I said before, it could be an employer, a supplier or a designer. And I think a design is a very important one. That comes up when a project's going to be undertaken. Work with the designers can be discussed before the project starts. So it's not just while the project or the building's being built or the road's being built. It's a question of how are you going to maintain these structures and work processes once they're in place. So you're looking at the long-term issue. And we've all seen situations where houses look beautifully designed, and yet how do you get up to replace a light bulb that's been positioned in a hallway that's a 2-story atrium where you'd have to get an extension ladder to put a light bulb in. So they're the sorts of things that if it's thought through, you can engineer out the problem either for the worker or for the homeowner, the individual at the beginning. The other most important thing here for New Zealanders is this positive duty of due diligence on officers. Officers will be directors and CEOs of companies. Now, as in Australia, we have many, many small businesses, and directors simply could be a husband and wife team running a small business employing 3 or 4 people. They will carry this extra duty, which means that they have to understand the risk of their business and understand and be assured that the steps to manage the risks and the hazards are actually being undertaken. And then there's the primary duty of care through eliminating or managing the risks, and that's similar to what we have. And there'll be more authority for health and safety representatives to be able to perhaps issue improvement notices. Now, we already have a system where people can be elected as a health and safety representative, and if they are, they then have certain protection of the law and they can receive free training to undertake their role. So the primary duty of care, as we said, similar to what we have now, that those terms so far as reasonably practical, and there'll be guidance sitting below that to say, well, how do you go through that reasonably practical test? Is the solution readily available? Is it in relationship to the degree of risk, and what would the cost be? The due diligence ones I talked about before, this is the one really which we believe will not trip people up, but it will pose a challenge for particularly small businesses. They really have to understand what are the risks of running their business. Now, if they're actually an owner-operator, they'll know that. But if it's a larger business, medium size, the board of directors will have to really, instead of leaving it to the chief executive and the team, they'll have to actually be more involved in ensuring that injury prevention and health and safety processes are actually in place, and secondly, they're actually functioning as required. As you can see, that last bullet point, they have to review health and safety matters and verify that resources and processes are in place and are being used. So that's sort of an overview of where we've got to. The feeling was, I think, Pike River explosion sort of lifted the lid on things, as we say. There was a feeling that New Zealand was not doing as well as it should. And there's a whole number of initiatives underway. Probably it's fair to say the focus is right now about changing the legislation, and we believe the challenges going forward will be how do small businesses and the communities they live in, how do they cope with these changes and the coaching they need to understand of what they're doing now, how does it fit into the new approach. And the underlying theme that we're pushing, giving to our members is that if you're doing what you're meant to do now, which is proactively thinking about the risks and the hazard you've got and how would you prevent the injury occurring before it occurs. And if you're doing that sort of thing, you're well positioned for the future. So contact details there's some there for you. All those details about the legislative changes are under with MIMBY and WorkSafe. ACC has a wealth of information about injury rates and initiatives on their website. And if you look at ours under our H&S Reform Hub, and there's a whole lot of information there which is available to the public and more for our members. So Tanya, that's for me, if there's any questions.
Thanks, Jeff. That was fantastic. It gave a really good overview of where workplace safety is sitting, especially legislatively in New Zealand, and some of the drivers of change. Now, does any of our attendees there have any questions at all that they would like to ask of Jeff? You can either put your hand up and we can unmute you. You can type one in, or alternatively, if you don't want to speak over the webinar, you can send Jeff or myself or Megan an email afterwards.
Tanya, just one other thing I meant to say, all this legislation and new codes of practice and regulations take effect on 1 April 2015.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. It looks like we haven't got any questions there today. I would now like to invite Andy Redfern, who will speak about an initiative from Waitaki Safe Community, which is one of our newest safe communities here in New Zealand. So I'm just going to hand over the controls to Andy.
Cool, thank you, Tanya. So my name's Andy Redfern. So I work for ACC here in New Zealand, and my role is as a community injury prevention consultant. And I've been working with the Safer Waitaki Safer Community group since its inception. Right, now we've just got a few slides. I haven't got many slides at all. And it's really, I think, Tanya and Megan asked us, and myself and Teresa, just to talk about our experiences of having a sort of a workplace forum or workplace strategy within the safer community context. And certainly ours, as Tanya said, we're a pretty new safer community. I suppose activity started in the Waitaki region around 2011, and then we gained accreditation in 2013. So we're pretty new, sort of new at it. And and as well, this employer forum, this Safer Waitaki Industry Link, is just getting going. So some of what I'm going to be talking about is more really, I suppose, the key drivers to why we've got our sort of forum or network going, and some of the early benefits that they were seeing. And I think that'll work really nicely in with the stuff that Teresa's going to talk about after me, which in their community is much more further down the sort of the track. So probably just as well to give just a quick snapshot about the Waitaki area, because I think a lot of the stuff we're seeing, a lot of the benefits is very contextually based around the community that it's within, and obviously different communities have different makeup sort of employers and things like that. But and as well, the Waitaki is a fantastic place. So those of you unfortunate enough to live in Australia and have never visited the Waitaki, it might spur you on if you're ever doing a South Island trip. So basically, based on the east coast of the Low South Island of New Zealand, and it's a big, long sort of province really. It goes right from the beautiful Southern Alps and goes right through to the Pacific Ocean, with the Waitaki River running right through it. It's quite a large geographic area, and I think that's one of the important things. It's around 7,000 square kilometres, but it's got a population of just under 21,000. So it's actually quite a it's not a highly populated area. Oamaru is the largest town, but there's lots of small settlements. The main industries, probably ag and fisheries, is around 20% of the economic base. Manufacturing comes in at about 15%, with a quite a strong focus in that that aspect of sort of meat processing and things like that. So it's got an industrial base, if you like. So there's lots of wide open spaces, lots of agricultural stuff, and not very few high density population areas. And I think that's why we're seeing some of the benefits we're getting, because in a community like that, some of the smaller towns are very dependent on maybe one or two employers, and the employers are the community. They're in there and they know it and things like that, which is a slightly different sort of picture if you're talking about a city or something like that. And I think that's one of the benefits we've had. And why the Safer Waitaki Industry Link has been so beneficial to the safer community model as a whole, really. Right. I'll see if I can steer my PowerPoint. Why is that not working then? All right. So really, from a safer communities sort of aspect, obviously, in 2011, Waitaki was having those conversations with our broader community, looking at our gaps and starting to talk about, to groups and agencies about the benefits of forming a safer community. And obviously, employers in any safer community are a really important group, and they certainly had a voice at that point. And to the extent of some of the larger employers, especially are on our management group and on our governance group. And so they were really key to finding out some of the issues and what have you. But still, there was a knowledge from the management group of the safer communities that there was more potential within that group, and they had a strong sort of part to play. So we looked at one of the mechanisms of unlocking that, and that was the thing we came up with is forming them as one of the focus groups within our sort of makeup. So so we pulled together a meeting of sort of employers, and I think everybody was pretty blown away right from the start of that potential, really. So that first meeting generated such a lot of interest, and it generated a lot of ideas and potential. And a lot of that initial stuff from the first meeting was right on the money, really. The first initial ideas, and a lot of that discussion at that first meeting was around sharing resources and best practice ideas, and that was seen as a really integral sort of thing within a community of those, because most of the employers are small to medium. There was certainly on that. I was looking at the notes, and on that first meeting, a lot of discussion about the opportunity to visit other employers and go to other workplaces and see what's actually going on there. A desire to look at regional-wide initiatives, and just really a real sort of focus on learning and sharing in that sort of local context. And I think that's really important, because that's why I gave that snapshot of the Waitaki region, because in an area where Waitaki is sort of sandwiched between Christchurch and Dunedin, and it's quite a wee while to get to anything. So often communities like Waitaki struggle to get that skill base, or not skill base, but external people in to do that, to bring in that training and things. So a lot of that is they're reliant on the skill base that's happening internally, and that certainly has been what has always happened, but it's been magnified by this group. So how far have we come? Really, I suppose for a forum or a group which hasn't been functioning very well, I think it's come a really long way, and that's by no means small part of it to the sort of the commitment of the local employers, really. So we've got a forum of around 20 sort of core employers who meet every couple of months, and that's a great size of group. Some of it will grow, and some of it talks to the spread of the employees, because some of them it's hard for them to get to a central place. But that 20 number is a really nice group, because the big thing about this group is around the conversations and the discussion rather than the presentations and that sort of higher level stuff, and it's that group's still able to have honest and open conversations. I think a really important thing that got the group established well was early on was the development of a really clear terms of reference. And it's easy to miss that bit out when you're forming a group, but for this, in this context, it was really important that it was just not another meeting to attend. And so, the group were able to actually steer their own terms of reference and put very clearly down what was beneficial to them as businesses, because their time is important. And likewise, we have a sort of pretty set agenda each meeting, so we cover the same areas, so people can prepare and get ready and things like that. Realistically, I think one of the strongest things that come out is that sharing of experience, and that's the stuff I was alluding to before. And for that group, that's the most important thing. Everything seems to boil down to actually those shared experiences. And we have got a big range of employers, small, medium, the bulk of them, but some big employers with lots of different sort of levels of experience. And you can see that sort of learning happening just from the discussion, and possibly the cup of tea even beforehand, sort of thing. And we do use guest speakers to stimulate a bit of conversation and get that information out. And that can be, it's been interesting because you can get external people, and with good bases of knowledge and things like that, but actually using people from within the community with a slightly different slant, who can offer a different sort of view. Like the last meeting, we had our road safety coordinator talking about the things that he was doing within the community, and you could see those linkages being made by the employees, where they, and the groups within the room, because some of the stuff that he was doing may not fall directly into the employer space, but they certainly could see the benefit and where it's sort of linked in with the long term. So using that, again, using that internal sort of skill base is really useful. Benefits-wise, I think we're seeing, we've seen benefits coming really from early on, and often these sort of forums take a while to mature and develop, and that development's still going on. But we've seen really strong benefits right from the start, really. And that big thing there is readiness to share skills that are on the doorstep, and a real recognition. I think in an area like the Waitaki, that's always happened because people are neighbours and people are within the community, and they've grown. They've grown up together and gone to school together and things like that. But within that, the forum, you can see the actual logic behind that, saying that you've got all that skill base down the road in an organisation, and actually why shouldn't you tap into it? That's really important, and our community's got to be a little bit self-contained because of where it is. The expanding the training opportunities is probably the thing that's taken off very quickly. We haven't got a formal system for it, but I just see lots of emails getting flicked through the networks, really saying, "Hey, I've got a first aid course running next week, and there's a couple of places. Does anybody does anybody need any first aid training done? Same with height training, restricted access and things like that. All that sort of training is coming through because in a small community with small businesses, often that training and getting upskilling your staff is very expensive. So actually being able to share that load and then being able to sort of form that critical mass together to make it worthwhile getting trainers and training into the area is a real benefit for that health and safety, I think. The next thing I've got there, the building trust, is huge, I think, and I think that'll keep going. It's easy when and I've done lots of employer forums, we do them all over the area, and it's really easy to get good employers to stand up and talk about the things they do really well and about how great they are and how fantastic your injury record is, which is great. But actually what we see in the link is actually people, much more useful, people being confident enough to say, well, actually these are the incidents we had last week and we're not quite sure how we're going to deal with them because we did an incident investigation, we don't know if it's good enough, and then that you can see the conversation taking off, and it's not an accusational conversation, it's actually a really positive, it's that sort of that commend and recommend sort of conversation where people are able to acknowledge what they've done well, but also get some really good tips and things like that, and again it just opens up a whole level of conversation around health and safety which is really difficult to actually attain sometimes with employers. And finally, I think from a safer communities point of view, we've seen that group feeding into the actual larger picture because, as I said at the beginning, employers have always had a large voice in any community around safer communities and where they sit in the community. But really they're starting to, that group can see those wider pictures. So on those broader safer community conversations, say around, alcohol and drugs and youth, or in our community we've been looking around mental health services and trying to advocate for some better services around that, and they can see the stuff that affects their workplace from the day-to-day level, but also you can see that bigger picture stuff where that broader community interaction is really important and has an effect on them as an employer and their effectiveness because and they vice versa, they're able to affect the way the safer communities advocate. Because in a community like the Waitakere, a strong, healthy, and functional community affects that's what they need really. So that's been really good. So hopefully that my presentation sort of, I suppose the key thing really is that pulling that employer group in and having that conversation about health and safety, it isn't like an adjunct or a side thing. It's really added to so many different aspects of both parts of that conversation from the safer communities and from an employer health and safety point of view. It's been really beneficial. And I think hopefully that will sort of continue on that theme to the next presentation with Teresa's stuff. So that's about me done, Tanya.
Thank you very much, Andy. That is, I think, given some of our communities out there some ideas of what they can do and how, if they're thinking of setting up an initiative within their own area. Andy can be contacted via email if you've got any questions for him, because I realise it's now just after 2 o'clock. So we'll go on to Teresa Gordon, who'll give you a brief overview of some of the workplace safety initiatives that are happening in New Plymouth. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Tanya. Hi everyone, my name's Teresa Gordon and I'm the Program Manager for New Plymouth Injury Safe Trust. I'm just going to quickly share with you some information about what some of our partner organisations do to contribute to workplace safety. New Plymouth Injury Safe is a charitable trust that was initially formed in 2000 and we've grown over the last 12 years to include trustees with a wide range of skills and abilities. With our most recent ones not showing up there is actually Federated Farmers has just joined us as a trust board, so we're really excited about that in relation to workplace safety. We're a small local authority with about 75,000 residents and we're located on the west coast of the North Island and we're part of the Taranaki region, so if you hear me referring to Taranaki, that's what it's all about. Back in 2007, my predecessor, Chana Perry, took a look at what was going on with young people's safety based on the knowledge that young workers all over the world were overrepresented in workplace injury statistics. We did a regional survey of high school students which showed that less than half of students working in jobs recalled being informed of their safety rights and responsibilities, and 20% of them said that they were injured on the job in some way, which adds up to roughly 270 students. Nearly all of them blamed themselves for the accident. What you can also see is that there was an overwhelming tendency for students to do as they're told, regardless of whether they thought it was safe or not. So in response to that survey and the needs shown in it, New Plymouth Injury Safe identified the safety of young workers to be a priority work area. 7 years later, workplace safety is still a strategic priority for us. There were a number of interventions that were trialled over the following couple of years, including seminars, online safety training for Year 10 students with a program called Passport Safety, and a few other things. Year 10 students in New Zealand are commonly 14 to 15 years in age, and there's a real opportunity to access them at school during their activity weeks near the end of the school year. They're not sitting external exams at this age, so they often have a week where they just do fun stuff. We currently access this age group for our Ready to Drive safety days, which are now focusing on driver licensing safety instead of workplace safety, due to us feeling that that's actually a higher priority. But two workplace interventions have stood the test of time due to the ongoing availability of resources, helpful partner agencies and good evaluation outcomes. And I'm just going to briefly run you through these now. So the Taranaki Schools Agricultural Safety Challenge is run as a partnership between Taratati, which is an agricultural training organisation, the local ACC office, Red Cross, Fire Service, Police, and a gentleman who was paralysed by his quad bike on a farm years ago. It's aimed at students studying agriculture as a subject at high school, and it's hosted every year at the same venue, which is a demonstration farm attached to one of our local high schools. And tomorrow will be the 17th running of the event. So I'm just going to flip that we do there. So we quad bike safety, animal handling, safety, chemical safety. You can see on the bottom left there one of the girls having to get suited up to prepare some chemicals for spraying, first aid, just general quiz kind of things. So that's really stood the test of time, and I really enjoy going along and being part of that every year. Another challenge that we have running every year is the Trades Apprentice Safety Challenge, and that is based on the Agricultural Safety Challenge model, and it's run annually at the Be Safe Taranaki Centre. And that's aimed at trades apprentices aged 18 to 25 years from the construction, engineering, oil and gas sectors. And these apprentices also compete in teams of 4, as do the Agricultural Challenge, representing their trade or company. What we have done in more recent years, if a single company can't provide 4 representatives, we join them up with another group so they can still get a full team. And there are 9 20-minute practical activities, including working at height, harness use, chemical safety, etc. And marks are awarded for safety skills, knowledge and teamwork. Now, Be Safe Taranaki run this event, and they as an organisation have grown from a drive for health and safety excellence in Taranaki. It was set up by leaders of a group of oil and gas companies and contractors collaborating with a keen interest to raise health and safety standards, not only in their operations but in the wider work environment and the community beyond. And one of these leaders, Rob Jager from Shell Todd Oil Services, led the recent independent task force review of workplace health and safety that led the major regulatory changes nationwide that Jeff spoke to you about earlier. Initially, the group sponsored and set up a centralised health and safety training centre, and that centre was a physical example of the focus for the group, which was raising the standard of health and safety in the region through common training and procedures. And the continued financial and active support of the 16 member companies mean that the great work can continue. has a great working relationship with the New Zealand Institute of Safety Management, which is the professional body for health and safety workers in New Zealand, and they collaborate regularly to host events and seminars. The construction safety group also, you know, there are all sorts of seminars held at the Be Safe Centre. We just had a Working at Height seminar yesterday that I just spoke to Jeff Wilson about before the start. We had 175 people attend that, so that was a great turnout. I personally also have a relationship with Be Safe. They're represented on our trust board, and I know how lucky we are to have their model operating in New Plymouth, and I invite anyone who wants to know any more about how Be Safe work to contact me, and I can make arrangements for you to visit at any time and meet with the director there, Alison Pittman. So here's a few from events over the years. This is the team of 4 trying to get the concrete mixer on the back of the ute in a safe way. And this event is held at the Be Safe's dedicated Health and Safety Training Centre each year. One push the message home that there is a crossover between health and safety at work and in the home. And these guys had to install 3 car seats safely across the back of my car. And the look of terror on their faces was absolutely priceless when they came to my activity. Some other guys working together. The last activity for the day, it's a quick fire quiz where they've got to run up and get their questions and run away, and it's an awful lot of fun. The winners for the 2014 Shield Energy Works. And I just want to finish with a small graph to show what we believe to be the positive effect of having a strong focus on workplace health and safety in New Plymouth District. You can see the ACC figures there showing that our claims rate across all areas is below that of New Zealand as a whole, and that our 5-year trend is also trending downwards. But there's no room to be complacent there. As I say when I have to stand up, our rates might be lower than the rest of New Zealand's, but New Zealand's rates are pretty appalling, so it's still not much to celebrate, so we keep working. So for information, go to the website or contact me on phone or email anytime. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Teresa. That was a fantastic presentation from New Plymouth, who I know are very active in the workplace safety area. I was particularly impressed to note the sort of growth you've had in your program and doing that crossover with home safety, and the challenge with the car seats was really nice to see. We've just got one question here. It's wanting to know, do you know if there's any other similar activities like this that programs run in other areas of New Zealand that they've done these sort of challenge courses?
So I call this format, because we use this across a number of areas of our work, the tabloid sports format, where you have the, these sort of modules of activities to in a competition environment. We've had plenty of ACC injury prevention consultants visit this challenge over the years, the Apprentice Safety Challenge, and I don't know if it's been transplanted. But we've used this format just most recently last month as a road safety for people on community work sentences who have been put on community work sentences for their dangerous driving, and we're doing that in partnership with the Corrections Department, and that I believe is being taken, will be taken nationwide over the next few years. So yeah.
Thank you, Teresa. Just one more quick question. We've had a note there that apparently Lower Hutt in that area, they operate one similar for apprenticeships. The other question that we have, do you have any follow-up on the students who participate in this, or the workplaces? What impact does it have if they move into employment?
In terms of the feedback from their employers as they go back in, is
I
very
think so, yes.
Yeah. I guess the employers are voting with their feet, and that they are sending new apprentices through each year. They're obviously getting something out of it in that respect. We had one incident where one group came last in the first aid safety module, and it was a real wake-up call for that organisation. They went back, did first aid training for their entire staff, and they came back and their apprentices came first in the module the next year.
Okay, thank you very much, Teresa. I hope that answers the questions, and you're available to contact if anybody else would like any information. I would like now to introduce our final presenter for this afternoon, Dr. Stan Saliagaris, who is speaking on Urban Development Industry Workplace Safety Programs. I'll hand over to you now, Stan.
Thank you very much, Tanya. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and to everybody else about the development industry and the range of workplace and community safety programs that take place in that sector. When I refer to the urban development industry, I'm referring to developers who are out there building new communities. These communities might be areas where there might be 7,000 or 8,000 lots that are being developed and put on the ground, which result in new communities of 10 to 20 to 30,000 people. And so the issues of workplace safety and also community safety, given that these are working sites, is very, very paramount, and it's something that we focus on very strongly. What I'm going to be talking to you about are my experiences today with an organisation known as Lendlease. Lendlease is a global integrated property and infrastructure developer. It's got sites all over the world. It focuses very much on the construction business and high-rise properties, things like hotels, medical facilities, community resorts. It's been involved in developing the Olympic Village for the London Olympic Games. It did the original Twin Towers in London. So you can see it's a very, very big company which undertakes a lot of major construction work. And over the last 15 years or so, it's got into the urban community development industry through its acquisition of an organisation that I work for initially, and that's Delphin, which originated in South Australia. When you look at Lendlease currently, it's probably got well over 20 active projects, community projects across Australia, which range in duration from a few years right through to a 30-year lifespan. So you're planning and developing the creation of new communities over that time period, and the community continues to grow as you're moving through those years. About 75% of the business really focuses on residential development and 25% on major commercial and community facilities. One of the things to note is that today in Lendlease we've got well over 100,000 people who are living in communities that have been created by the company, and so there's a strong track record of very significant and positive community development that's taken place. And the company has well over 70,000 allotments in a bank ready for development and expansion over the next 30 years. And when you look at what that's going to produce, it's going to produce housing choices for well over 200,000 people during that particular time. So it is a major company and one that's had a significant impact on the development industry in Australia. It's probably one of the 4 major companies that are operating in that sphere in Australia. One of the key things about the company is that it's always promoted the fact that safety is paramount. It's paramount from a workplace or company perspective to a community perspective as well. So from the business side, from the company side, it's really promoted safety first as a policy that's come through from the top. The chief executive and the board have constantly reminding all staff right around the world of the importance of safety. And so they make sure that in each location there is a worksite safety and induction program that takes place together with a training register for all people to be part of it. There's a strong focus on incident and creating incident and injury-free environments, and in particular on looking at any statistics that relate to incidents that occur on any of the projects or assets that are being developed. And there's a very strong focus on developing benchmarking of these over time in terms of national benchmarks and international benchmarks, and seeing that these decrease and work towards. And so if there are issues that emerge, these are constantly addressed straight away through the environmental health and management system. And that particular management system really has in place managers on each of those projects that are focusing on EH&S. They look at critical incident reporting and ensure that lessons are learnt from any incidents that might take place, and that that is filtered back up the system to create better and more informed policies. And there's a strong focus on ensuring that we collect the statistics and report it back on a monthly basis. One of the things that's occurred is that as an organisation across the board, it's set up what are called global minimum requirements for health, environment and safety standards across the globe, and these are really designed to control the risks associated with the construction of any asset or the operation of any project. So these global minimum requirements, or GMRs as they were referred to, really become the benchmark to which each of the projects down at the community level that I worked at operate on. And at the community level, one of the key and fundamental issues that we always had to focus on, because these are construction sites, was on building site security, safety and theft, and a lot of focus was put on how we reduce that. From a community's perspective, and that is from the people that are there, we had a strong focus on creating safe communities. We developed child and family friendly policies which indicated how things were to be constructed and how we would involve families in the decision making. There was a focus on creating safe and healthy communities, and also how we would make our communities socially and environmentally sustainable, because at the end of the day, as a developer, we would be there for 5, 10, 15 years, after which all the programs that were initiated by us, which focused on health and safety and welfare, had to be taken over by the community themselves or by organisations within those communities, and so it became very important for us to look at sustainability of those programs. There was a strong focus on getting the community to embrace safety principles in all aspects, and that occurred from three perspectives. One was in the urban design, so that as project teams we would focus on public spaces and recreational areas and the like, and schools and traffic intersections, and have a look at our design features and ensure that they were always meeting all the safety requirements and standards, and continuing to up the ante in those particular areas. We continuously work with our national safety bodies and state bodies to develop community connections, and by that we refer to organisations like the police and rural fire services, where we develop very strong partnerships to help develop and initiate programs on site which made our communities aware of safety issues within the localities that they were working on. We also developed a range of programs which can always contain some very strong safety messages and lessons for our residents and stakeholders, and I'll talk about these a little bit later on. And in all of our projects we always made sure that we had safe community strategies in place, and the objective there was to always create safe and injury-free environments where people of all ages can live, learn, work and play. From the EH&S perspective, we developed what we termed a safety six-pack, which meant there were 6 things that we looked at whenever we went into any particular project, and they became the focus of our work in that area. The very first thing when we began working on any community project or any asset, the whole issue was to do a gap analysis against our global minimum requirements and work out where in fact we needed to be focused in terms of more attention on improving safety in particular areas. We would develop an EH&S plan, and that included our risk management profile, and that would be reviewed every 6 months by our safety leadership team. So that became a very strong focus of our work. The third strategy was to develop an incident and injury-free action plan, which addressed all the issues from 3 perspectives: the employees that were a part of the organisation and working on the project, the stakeholders that were part of that project in its development, and that in many cases they were external people who would come in, and thirdly, the community itself and how we engage with it. We made sure that we have staff training registers, and staff would run through a number of induction programs and safety programs, as I've indicated there on the slide, and that they became very, very important. There was a process that we would have to go through these every 1 to 2 years and continuously review and update our knowledge, particularly in areas where there were changing specifications in terms of safety. For each team we developed, for each project we developed a safety leadership team, and that was an important part of making sure that there was a strong focus on safety in all of our projects. And the leadership team and the EH&S managers would always report back and provide feedback to the organisation at a high level through a number of mechanisms which enabled them to pick up issues and continuously refine their global minimum requirements. The EH&S plans that we established on each project had to be signed off by the manager, the EH&S manager, as well as the project or asset director. So there was a strong commitment to making sure that these things were embedded in the fundamentals of each project. From a community safety perspective, we focused on 3 major areas. One was, how do we go about developing child and community safety programs? And I just list an example of some examples of some of the things that we've done over the years in terms of home safety and security programs, looking at promoting home management systems for our houses that were being built there. In some of our regions it was fundamentally important to look at fire safety because they were in rural areas surrounded by conservation land, and so we had to look at fire safety, escape plans, smoke alarms in all of our homes. Likewise, in some of the communities we would have creeks and waterways running through there, and so it was fundamentally important to have a flood safety strategy in place, as well as, because we build a number of lakes in our communities, to have a program around still water safety. All of our communities have schools, and so safety around the school is fundamentally crucial and important, and so it became a major priority of our work in those communities. In terms of health and well-being, there was a very strong focus on first aid and CPR and falls prevention. Things that were related to each community. For example, I recall in some of our communities that were rural areas, we would run seminars in relation to snakes because they were prevalent in those communities, and we would indicate to our communities how in fact to deal with snakes and what the issues were if one was bitten and how to go about it. We ran some major project initiatives. For example, at Mawson Lakes in South Australia, we began, in conjunction with the South Australian Police Force, a program of community policing where we had on-site a policeman who worked with the project team and interfaced with the community and the businesses that were there in terms of promoting community safety, and that person became an integral member of the community, the schools, the organisations that we had there, as well as the business sector, and became well known as the front line for any issues concerned with safety and security. We initiated neighbourhood watch programs and community safety workshops, and then obviously right through, if we had newsletters that went to the community, they always contained very strong safety messages. What I'd like to talk to you very briefly about is one of the programs, that we initiated at Mawson Lakes, which was called Target Work, a school-to-work training program that provided Year 10 students with real-life work experiences in the building and construction trade. Students that were engaged in this constructed a range of things on our projects, including parks and pergolas and barbecue shelters and so on, and so they got a range of induction into the skills associated with the building construction industry, things like carpentry and plumbing and landscaping, civil works, and so forth, as you can see from the slide that I've got there. This particular program ran for a number of years at Mawson Lakes and was instrumental in facilitating the movement of a number of students from school into the workplace, and supporting that process were officers that we put in place to work with the students in that transition. The program, generally speaking, as an induction program, was a one-term program where students visited the construction site on 1 day a week, and the different schools were rostered on each day of the week. So it was very much a taster program to give students an awareness of what it would be like to work in the building construction industry. All of the students had to undertake very strong safety training, and that involved doing passport to safety, the white card training, and our Lend-Lease induction program. And it was fundamental that everyone had to undertake this before they were allowed on site. Students noted all of their work and what their learnings were as part of a journal. They reflected on that particular learning, and they related very well to the site supervisor in terms of any opportunities to further advance their skills. The learning experience from this program became part of the South Australian Certificate of Education accreditation process, and so the students received acknowledgement for that. And the whole program itself was recognised by the Urban Development Institute of Australia and won an award for community excellence several years ago. As you can see from some of the slides that I've just put down there, it was a very practical and hands-on program where students learned how to use tools and equipment in a safe way. They learned how to read map and the skills involved with that, as well as out on site and construct. So for us, it was fundamentally important that students who became part of the program, while a lot went on and moved into the building construction trade, a lot of them determined that that was not what they wanted to be. So that was, while people might think of that as a non-successful part of the program, I think giving younger people the opportunity to taste opportunities and to find out what is something that they'd like to spend their life doing as opposed to not doing is equally as valuable as those that moved into all of the areas that they did subsequently. And finally, one of the things that we did on all of our projects, and particularly at Mawson Lakes, was to focus very strongly on creating a safe community. This was one of our early projects where we began this strong focus, and we formed a safe community network to oversee the strategy. This evolved from our community policing program and our neighbourhood watch program, and this particular network comprised of community organisations, the businesses, the learning institutions, the schools, the childcare, the university, the South Australian Police, and regional bodies and council as well. This group worked over a number of years with the developers in promoting safety, fed back information into us to impact on the design features, and the work of that particular group was an instrumental part to how Mawson Lakes, to gaining International Safe Community accreditation for Mawson Lakes in 2012. The program and that group has continued to grow and evolve over the years since then, and it's produced a number of benefits for the community as a whole, because it's actually bonded the community and all sections of that community, because at Mawson Lakes you've got people who live there, people who work there, people who study there. It's bonded them together around a common purpose. It's helped develop the community's social capital and strong community leadership. And during the time of the project, it linked very strongly into the project planning and design functions of the project. And very importantly, the project, or that group, while it focused on a local perspective in the local community, it was still conscious about what happened on a regional basis around the community. And so it took on board issues that happened outside of its community, which might have impacted on the safety of that community. So that concludes what I have to say. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. If not, I'm happy to receive any emails or talk to people about some of the work that we've done in that particular area.
Thanks very much, Stan. That's really interesting what you had to say, and I was lucky enough to visit a number of Delphin sites and properties with some site visits in Australia, and I'm really pleased to say we've got one community here in Auckland that's starting to be a master plan community, because it really is a fantastic model that it's operating. I realise we've just hit the hour mark, so I would like to thank all of our participants and all of our presenters today for participating in this webinar, and please feel free to email any of our presenters today if you've got any questions that you might like to have. A reminder that this webinar, will be recorded, and it's going to be, a link's going to be put on the Australian Safe Community website and the New Zealand one probably by early next week, and you can share this with your colleagues. And just a reminder that our next webinar will be on crime prevention and community safety, and that will be on Thursday the 13th of November, and details will be circulated closer to this event. And as always, we like to hear your feedback, so you could be getting an evaluation notice shortly where you can rate the presenters today and give us any suggestions for future topics or any logistical things. All right, thanks everybody. Good afternoon or good morning.